Now, in today's video, we are going to be talking about Gavin Newsom's proposed 28th Amendment to the Constitution. It's been in the news for a couple of days already, but I want to really unpack what it is he's proposing, how it would affect the Second Amendment if it were actually to be ratified. I also want to discuss the likelihood of this thing actually being able to see the light of day. And then lastly, why it is Gavin Newsom's even proposing this to begin with. Now, before we get into our analysis, I think it's important to say that this proposal by Governor Newsom is actually somewhat of a tacit admission that he is losing the battle right now. When we had the court case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen, the Supreme Court created a new constitutional test. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that. There's enough videos out there that go over the history, text, and regulatory tradition analysis that we now use. Suffice to say, it is an arguable statement that 99% of the gun control statutes that currently exist most likely run afoul of this new Bruen test and therefore subject to be found to be unconstitutional. Now, Gavin Newsom is horrified at this prospect. To a large degree, his entire political life has been built around creating all of these impediments for law-abiding citizens to be able to keep and bear arms. This has been his cause célèbre. So he's furious right now that all of the work that he's done over the last 25, 30 years is crumbling around him. We have a number of legal cases here in California specifically challenging many of the noxious California gun control statutes. And candidly, we're winning right now because of the Bruen decision. Hey guys, this video is being sponsored by USCCA, and they're doing a contest right now. Now you can see what it is in the description linked below in this video. It does end soon, so you're going to want to participate. What they're giving away is very, very cool. All right, I can give you a hint. It fits in your holster. So Gavin Newsom has decided that the best way to potentially attack this problem is to simply amend the Constitution. So he's come up with this proposed 28th Amendment. Now, it is not in its current configuration a direct repeal of the Second Amendment. I will warn you, it could very well be. The proposal is actually not the text of what he would like the 28th Amendment to state. The proposal is to have a convention where a 28th Amendment would become effectively hashed out. It could be that in the final, analysis, it's nothing more than a strict repeal of the Second Amendment. But the important things that he wants to focus on in this proposal, it would be, number one, he wants to increase the minimum age from acquiring a firearm from 18 to 21. He doesn't like the fact that, individuals that are serving in our nation's military are able to defend our country and our Constitution at 18 years old, and in some cases even less than 18 years old, as civilians would be able to acquire a firearm. All right. So he wants just a blanket increase from 18 to 21. He also wants to mandate universal background checks. All right, so every single firearms transfer, regardless of how it takes place, would need to undergo some sort of government inspection to make a determination as to whether or not the person acquiring the firearm is in fact legally allowed to be in possession of a firearm. He then wants to include across the entire country, and I use his wording, reasonable waiting periods. Now, I have absolutely no idea what that means. For Gavin Newsom, I would assume that a reasonable waiting period would be 25 years. Okay. For someone else, it would probably be substantially less than that. All right. There's no definition as to what kind of waiting period he would like. nor does he discuss the fact that somebody who already owns firearms should be put in a position where they have to wait for a new firearm. Again, it makes absolutely no sense, but in all honesty, it's not intended to. And then, of course, the last thing is complete elimination of assault weapons. Now, again, I'm not entirely sure I understand what assault weapons are, but he does, in his language, put in the caveat that assault weapons are designed for the singular purpose of killing as many people as humanly possible, and therefore civilians should not have access to them. I think this becomes a little problematic for those of us who own, so-called assault rifles for target shooting, for varmint hunting, for competition shooting. The vast majority, if not the, all law-abiding gun owners that own AR-15s, AK-47s, and the like have not engaged in criminal conduct with these weapons. In fact, I think one could make an argument that the minute any sort of tool, regardless of whether it's ballistic or non-ballistic, is used to commit a crime to essentially attack another human being, that tool becomes an assault weapon. So if Gavin Newsom wants to be intellectually honest, perhaps we should ban assault hammers, ban assault fists, ban assault feet, ban assault vehicles. I think there's a lot of assault things we could probably make illegal before we go into anything that potentially could affect the Second Amendment. So in any event, how would something like this actually take place? Well, first off, you need to understand that what Governor Newsom is proposing is not the actual amendment. He's proposing some of the stuff he would like to see in the actual amendment. What he's actually proposing is that we have a constitutional convention where this amendment would be hashed out between the different delegates. So the final analysis, it's entirely possible that if we actually got to a convention, they could simply say the Second Amendment is repealed and be done with it. Okay, to make it a little bit more palatable, he's created it this way. I also want to sidebar for a second because he says something that I've heard a lot of people in the anti-gun collectivist over-regulatory community say, and that is that the vast majority of law-abiding gun owners all support these proposals. And they say that without being challenged, okay? I am yet to see a study where the general population of the Second Amendment community is polled and the majority of people essentially say, oh yes, we absolutely would like a greater degree of regulation put upon us. In fact, the possibility that we could sort of wake up one morning and find ourselves now subject to criminal prosecution, that's terribly exciting. We'd like to see that as well. So, he makes these statements. A lot of anti-gunners make these statements without having any empirical evidence to support their contention. I find it irritating at the very least, but that notwithstanding, how does this thing actually end up getting to a convention? Well, there's effectively two ways. Both the federal government, all right, the House and the Senate, 2/3 of both bodies could vote to have a convention. Alternatively, 2/3 of the state legislatures could all get together and vote to have a convention. This would then get us to the point where we actually have a formalized convention. In that convention, they would come up with an amendment, but then 3/4, regardless of how we get here, 3/4 of the state legislatures would have to vote for it. Then it would become part of the Constitution. Well, the idea that you can have 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate currently vote for this thing to come to fruition is, there's no way that could possibly happen, not with the political climate that we currently have. The idea that you could similarly have 2/3 of the state legislators all decide that they're going to have this, again, doesn't make any logical sense. And we've got 27 states that have essentially become constitutional carry. These are not states that are looking to overly regulate firearms and to potentially abrogate the Second Amendment. So to be just blunt, the numbers just are not there. This proposal is going nowhere, all right? It's not going to happen. Now, having said that, why is he doing this? I mean, what's the purpose of going through this process? Well, Gavin Newsom is, I believe, interested in possibly setting himself up for a presidential run. We've seen that he's going into red states. He's trying to argue that his policies in California, and trust me, I'm a California resident, okay? I know how much damage he and his party, quite frankly, have done to California. There is a reason why so many people are fleeing California, okay? But, again, that notwithstanding, he's trying to make the argument that this California utopia is something that could be foisted across the entire country, and the best way for that to happen is if he is president of the United States. The question really is Gavin Newsom running for the presidency in 2024, or is he going to be running for the presidency 4 years later? There is some arguments that are being floated around that Gavin Newsom is setting himself up for the potential nomination if Joe Biden is either incapable or decides not to run for president. So he's setting the groundwork. And one of the things that he's trying to do is show his bona fides to all of the deeply blue states. He is absolutely anti-gun, and as a result, he wants that level of support. Whether or not this is ultimately successful remains to be seen. I will say one thing, it has definitely got himself into the media. I mean, he's getting ink as a result of it. Trust me when I tell you that if it wasn't for this proposed 28th Amendment, I would not be talking about Gavin Newsom, okay? He's not exactly someone who I enjoy discussing. But that, again, notwithstanding, it's in that respect, it might have worked. Anyways, we'll have to see what ultimately comes about with this. Like I said, it's not something that I would be particularly concerned with, but it does sort of telegraph the direction, at the very least, that the Democratic Party is likely to embrace as we move forward. All right, that, as I always say, if you want to email me, absolutely do so. You can email me at stephen@artemishq.com. And as always, I want you to train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.
Before you go, you just missed one of our best videos that got over 500,000 views. Click right here to watch it now.